to not take any of this for granted and not get annoyed about it. And that goes for the conflict too. It's like, well, you know, I've tried to have my agent screen out maybe the more egregious interviews, you know, the ones that would just be nothing but combat, because I find them quite stressful, though I wouldn't say I'm hiding from them. But you don't know to begin with how an interview is going to go, and I could just say, well, I'm done having interviews for a while. But I can't help but see that the conflict is a necessary part of this, even though I don't find it pleasant. Like, people think, they accuse me of being a provocateur, of enjoying the conflict, and it's actually not true at all. I don't enjoy it at all. It usually takes me about 3 days to recover from a particularly contentious interview, you know, because I find conflict, interpersonal conflict, quite stressful.
Yes.
You know, but I think
everyone does.
Yes.
And to pretend you don't, you're either a sociopath or you're a liar.
Yes. Well, there are people who seem to enjoy that kind of intellectual combat, you know, that they and the political types are more like that, but But
I think they still afterwards feel it. And if they read the comments and people are against them, it's just that unease, it carries.
Well, you would think so.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even know how people deal with it, because, I mean, I've been fortunate because although, you know, I've had a fair bit of negative press coverage, the comments on YouTube in particular, which is where the bulk of them are, and I would say among the general public, have been overwhelmingly positive. I don't know what the hell it would be like to be in a world where that was reversed, where you know, the majority of people are against you.
Well, I've seen it. I've seen it happen with guests that I've had on the show, where I've met them afterwards, and you see a physical effect on them. You see them beaten down, like, Jesus Christ, those comments are so mean. I'm like, you can't read those. You just can't read those. And you see how it's affecting them. Like, they can't sleep. They read it. It fucks with them. They'll stay up for nights. You know, it's not good. You're taking in all of these opinions of hundreds, if not thousands, of people that you don't even know. You don't know if they're coming from a healthy place, and most of those opinions, they would not express it that way if they were talking to you. Even if they could get the same message across, like, I think you were ignorant to these facts. I think you're biased in your perceptions. Even if they had an opinion that was unflattering, the way that to express it to you, they'd be considerate about you and your feelings as a human being. And if they weren't, you wouldn't take into consideration what they're saying, because this guy's just an asshole. But when you just see it in type, we just see print. It just doesn't. It could be a smart person. It could be a psycho. It could be a fool. It could be anything.
Well, it's also funny too, because the negative comments that are part of social media seem to be just as potent as negative comments in real life, but the positive comments don't seem to be as positive as the positive comments in real life.
Yes.
Like, and they don't seem as real. And I guess that's partly because we're wired, you know, to be more sensitive to threat and to negative emotion, because we can be hurt.
Well, it's also healthy too to not stroke your ego too much. If you're just like concentrating only on the like there's something distasteful if you go to someone's page and they just retweet all the positive things that people say to them, because then it has this sort of reinforcing side. Like, people know that if I say something really positive to Jordan, he's going to retweet me. Like, there are some people that they engage in this sort of commerce. You know, like, you say something positive, they retweet you, and you know, it's a little too strokey,
right?
You know? People get really into that, stroking their own back.
Yeah. Well, I guess the danger of that is that possibility of that ego inflation that you really want to avoid, because that's a bad idea. Oh, that's a very bad idea.
Well, you've done a wonderful job of avoiding those waters, because this is for a guy who's in his 50s, who becomes famous out of nowhere, and doesn't just become famous, but becomes this culturally significant sort of lightning rod. I mean, that's how I view you, and a lot of these talks that you're doing, a lot of these debates like you're having with this woman at GQ, or some of your interviews. What you're doing is you're expressing yourself in a brave but very controversial way, and a lot of people are paying attention to this, but then you're backing it up with your research, you're backing it up with real science, you're backing up with a tremendous amount of history of the human race, and of religion, and of the scientific studies that have been done that show correlations between different types of behaviors in human beings. And all this is rich. It's very rewarding if you could take it all in. But when it goes against what people have, their preconceived notions or their own set of beliefs that they're bringing to your conversations and to your debates, then it creates this hostile battle where what you're saying is very contrary to the way they've been living their life, or these
really saw
preset
that in
patterns of behavior.
Really saw that in Scandinavia. Yeah, well, I was there. I went to Stockholm twice, and Oslo twice, and Helsinki twice, and Copenhagen once in the last month. And I spent there was a lot of interviews, and a lot of discussion about the so-called gender paradox. And that's a very interesting thing, because it's really put their tails in a knot in Scandinavia. And that makes sense, because the Scandinavians are going to have to deal with this first, because they've gone the farthest down the road for like making their society gender equal.